We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lucy Pico. I'm your co-host, Austra, and today we're joined by the host herself, Lisa. And we're kind of like turning things around a bit, because with this conversation, it will be a bit more of me kind of asking some questions to you. And I will be adding some stuff from me as well. But like the kind of the topic that we're going into today is survival mode. And it's a big one. And it's also something that I feel even like when I would be going through that place, it's a place where you can feel really stuck and even like feel like kind of giving up, or everything feels hopeless and helpless. So that's the topic today, and welcome, Lisa.
Yeah, we got to have a little.
My pleasure.
It's a heavy subject. It is heavy.
Yeah. So I think it could be valuable for us to start with even explaining what is survival mode, or what it was looking like for you.
So survival mode, for me, it was a way that I lived my life as a child, and I carried it into my adult life. And so what it was is first of all, I was never calm, but I was always looking for something to fix. There was always something to be fixed. That's exactly the way it felt. And if there wasn't something to be fixed, I was on the hunt to fix it. And so, and I've said it throughout my podcast, when you're in survival mode, and I'll go over some of the symptoms, I call them, you're not present. You're not present because you're kind of forward thinking, because like I said, you're looking for that next problem or that next thing to fix. And that's where you're at.
Yeah, and it's not like a good forward think where you're kind of like thinking of like future or something you can build up or something. It's more so kind of you're literally in survival, just like trying to predict or avoid a potential upcoming
predict or
threat.
Avoid. Those are the exact right words, because that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to predict what could possibly go on next, right? And it's exhausting. So these are just some of I call them symptoms of being in survival mode. They were for me, and I had posted a question on a private Facebook page, and I wanted to know what others felt too. And all of these were on every single one of their responses. It was really interesting. So exhausting, which was the first one I said, and it is. I was always wondering why I was always exhausted. And for like 9 years, I smoked cigarettes, right? Up into my early 20s before I started a family. And I thought it was that. I thought it was because I smoked cigarettes. And then I quit smoking cigarettes and I was still exhausted all the time. So that's what it was. A foggy mind, or really forgetful. That's a big one. Or clumsy. Mm-hmm. I was really clumsy. Hyper awareness. Everybody said that. And that's true. And that's part of the forward thinking. That's part of the anticipating or avoiding a problem. Mm-hmm. A lack of trust. And it's not just trust with others, but it was trust with me as well. That was a big one. Disconnecting. So disconnecting from others. So you could even be isolating, or you even disconnect from yourself. You disconnect a lot from the emotions and the feelings. And that's part of survival mode, is keeping yourself so busy that you also don't feel anything, or you don't deal with your emotions. So there's definitely a disconnect. A need to control. And that was definitely a big one for me. And I've shared on the podcast before how the day that I recognized that I had no control over anybody else, and it was quite frustrating, to be honest. But so much of your life is out of control. You're trying to grasp onto something. So you're trying to control everything.
Yeah.
Intense fear. Just really intense fear. And again, is that anticipating something, I'm not anticipating something good to happen. I'm anticipating something bad to happen. So there's that constant intense fear. This is a good one. Irritable when overwhelmed, which it doesn't take much for me to get overwhelmed, because in survival mode, my anxiety is right there at the surface, right there at the top. And so if something goes wrong, it doesn't take much for me to be overwhelmed at all. Excuse me. Worry, constant worry. Again, it's that forward thinking, looking for stuff. People pleasing. That's a real common one. Get into the people pleasing because you don't want anybody upset with you ever. And these next two sound like they're the same, but they're not. Overthinking and ruminating. They sound the same, but they're different. Overthinking is you're just overthinking everything. Ruminating is you're taking a situation, like let's say you made a mistake, right? You sit and you think it over and over and over and over, and you don't stop. And while you're thinking that same mistake that you made over, you are beating yourself up. So that's the difference. Overthinking, you're overthinking everything. You take a situation and you think it to death, right? So they're a little bit different. Obsessing, that was a big one for me. I would obsess over everything, trying to obsess over people, me, my choices. This last one is going to sound kind of weird, but body tightness. And what that means, I'll give you a really good example is, I recognize that this is only over the last like 10 years that I've recognized that I'm really tense all the time. And I've mentioned, like, when I've got my nails done, excuse me, when I've got my manicures, they're telling me to relax and I can't relax my hands. But the one thing that came to mind, and I didn't understand this at the time, is with my ex-husband, when I would answer the phone, and this happened often, not every time, but often, he would say, "Did you just run to the phone?" And I would literally be sitting there and just pick up the phone. And I said, "No, why?" He goes, you're breathing hard. Yeah. It's because I was so tight all the time and tense all the time in survival mode. And that explains why I've had to have a lot of surgeries from tearing up my body. But I wasn't breathing. I wasn't breathing deep, full breaths. It was shallow because I was so tight all the time. And it used to confuse me back then, because I thought, okay, I know I'm out of shape, but I can't be out of breath just sitting here. So that's just some of I call them symptoms or things that you deal with when you're in survival mode. I know that there's probably more, but those were the most common that came up. And then some of them are ones that I added that I dealt with.
Yeah. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then feel free to comment below if there's anything that you have experienced or any of these you can identify with. Or just share some of your experiences so we can also see what you're going through, or there's some other things that we might touch on in like some other episodes.
I was going to say, because what's important is, and that I found in so much of this healing and when I did the workshop, is us connecting with each other. And that is us having commonalities. Because all of these things that I dealt with back in the day, and I didn't know I was in survival mode, I thought I was crazy. I really did. I thought there was something seriously wrong with me because I was dealing with all this stuff. And it just made me close up even more. It made me hide even more and isolate more. And so that's why it's good for us to share what we're thinking, what we're dealing with, because then we can connect. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm not alone in this. This really is something that is not our fault.
Yeah. And that's important. Yeah. So that's a long list. So with this, do you know what made it might be an obvious question, but still I think worth asking, what made the survival mode to start?
So it did start with the childhood abuse. And, when you're in a situation where there's abuse all the time, or there's a threat of abuse all the time, which was with me, I always felt like, is either going to happen or it could happen. So I was always afraid, which puts you in a place of constantly having to protect yourself. And for me, there's limited things I could do. Is leave the house. A lot of times I used to call my bedroom my safe place because it was, as long as I was in there by myself. But that's a lot of what it is it's learning as a child in this adult situation how to protect yourself in that situation. And you're a child, so you have limited resources. And what happened with me is that I just took that into my adult life because I never did the healing at that time. So that was just the way I lived my life, and I carried it into my adult life. So it comes from childhood abuse.
So with that, could it also be that it's to what you were talking about, having to constantly kind of protect yourself? I feel like it goes hand in hand with that lack of
Yes.
sense of
Yeah.
safety or
Oh, yeah.
security. And how, well, with that, even like, how did that look like for you, or how did you navigate through, and what were some of the tools that you initially came up with, literally out of the need of survival?
Well, that one of just constantly looking for a problem, that was a big one for me. And if the problems weren't coming to me, I would go to them. Does that sound crazy? Because when you're raised in chaos, that's unfortunately your comfort level. It's all you know. It's your
It's all you
comfort
know.
level. Because for me, having the calmness meant something was going to happen. The next shoe was going to drop. The rug was going to get pulled out from under me, because that is what I was raised with. As soon as I was calm and I thought things were fine, boom, something would happen and I'm off in survival mode again.
So with that, I'm even thinking that safety can be affected by that sense of being able to predict things, because you weren't in environment where you are safe, but also you're safe consistently, or it's like kind of you can predict that, okay, I'll be safe today, I'll be safe
Yeah, you
tomorrow
don't
as
have.
well.
It's
So it's
always the
always that like
uncertainty.
uncertainty.
And it's interesting you say that, because what came to me too when you were mentioning about being predicting, that's exactly where you get to. And that's the hyper awareness. And I think about it because I have taken that into my adult life, where I'm trying to predict what's going to happen so that I can control it, so that I can manage it, so that I'm hopefully not going to get hurt. The predicting thing that's all part of the forward thinking, is trying to predict. And you're trying to predict all these different scenarios that can happen and how you're going to manage all that. Can you see why it's exhausting?
Especially when it doesn't go the way
And when
you
it
plan it
doesn't,
out. And then there's another wave
that's where
coming
you hit the
of
ceiling.
uncertainty.
That's where you hit the ceiling, because you're in survival mode. And here I'm thinking, oh, I've got this under control. And then something comes out of left field that I didn't have on my little radar. And the first place I would go is complete and utter panic. Complete and utter panic.
So how did that
Oh, I
panic
was a
look
crazy
or
woman.
feel like?
I mean, I shouldn't say it like that, but I mean, I really, I did. I was that overwhelming. I would yell. I would be frustrated. I would be short with people. I just, imagine what it felt like is like I came home and my house is on fire. Like my house is engulfed in fire and I'm trying to figure out how to put that fire out. That's exactly the way it felt.
So with this, there's a question that came to me, because that place in itself, it sounds like a really tough place to be. Now looking back at that, Lisa, and this I think is something that can be helpful to people who might be listening who are going through that or experiencing that. What would you say to her?
I would say stop. Stop what you're doing and take a deep breath, because that pause is what is going to kind of snap you out of that survival mode. It's stop a minute, just stop a minute, take a breath, try to get your mind calmed down enough to where, because it's irrational. You're in an irrational state. It's totally
It's like
reactive,
reactive.
100%.
Yeah.
and you're reacting to something that you don't know how to fix. And so I would say absolutely stop and take a breath. And just, if you can, take 5 deep breaths and see if you can get your mind calmed down enough to where you can look at the situation a lot calmer. Because I went into it again, the house is on fire and I've got to put it out. So you got to get the mind calmed down for just a second. Calm down enough that you can be rational, because again, you're irrational when you're in that state.
And so with this, touching on intense fear, and I also wrote next to
Ooh,
that desperation, because that's something that came in my mind, that you're kind of
definitely.
like desperate. Because like even as we're talking about survival mode, I feel like it's valuable to mention that it doesn't have to be permanent,
Oh
because it
yeah.
might feel like that in the moment, but it's not. So that's something that can give anybody listening who might be going through that a slight sense of hope. But even like, because this list is quite long and it's quite extensive, and anybody might go through and they're like, oh my gosh, I have like all of these or most of these things, and how do I even like deal with it, and how do I that's why I think it's valuable even like hearing your story, because now you're on the other end, you're not in survival mode anymore. And not only survival mode, you're more like
True.
in thriving mode. Like it's literally like it's
Mm-hmm.
opposite of survival mode. So you're like an example of what's possible. And going a bit into your story is something that's helpful, in a sense that I feel like it's similar to what you said when we mentioned about commenting listeners' experiences. It just seems like a lot of times you kind of are out on the other end, and it's all great, but how do you actually go through that? And this is where we're kind of like touching on that and sharing some of the stories that people can kind of connect with, and see that I'm not crazy, I'm not weird, this is a process to go through. And sadly, it's not something that, not that I'm aware of, you can get rid of or
No.
change overnight. It is something that is not going to change quickly, and there's some self-work that needs to be done, taking responsibility as well, and like some hard decisions or hard looks in the mirror that can be helping with
Yeah.
that. But touching on the intense fear or desperation as well, what did that look like or feel like, and even like how did that affect you going into adult life? Because it's not like it happened when you were in literally survival mode. You also mentioned that you were dragging this
Yeah.
survival mode
Yeah.
with you.
The fear was horrible, because the fear kept me from doing really anything positive in my life. It really, fear either completely made me freeze or it made me run. And I know that those are two real common ones. Um, I think a lot of times I did the
Yeah.
running and trying to fix things because, in in my first marriage, and I was married for a long time, that's just how it was. And and I got to the point where it just was kind of life, even though I would sit back and look at it and go, God, I'm
Mm.
exhausted. And I would see the behavior and I would see the patterns, but I didn't know how to change them. And so the fear,
Mm.
the fear just, it really kept me in the survival mode. It was kind of the fuel that kept everything going, because there was a constant fear of something's going to happen. Something's going to give, the rug's going to get pulled out. So it was really kind of the fuel in my life.
What is it that you were afraid of?
Everything. I really was. A lot of, I think the biggest fear was not having stability in my life, because I didn't. Not having instability where I lived, stability in my relationships, stability within me. Um, but really, honestly, it didn't take much for me to be afraid of anything.
Was there like anything that was stable? Or kind of like,
Nope.
I'm just thinking, let's say something that you would kind of hold on to as you're walking through that. Was there anything stable?
I did have a couple of friendships for sure that I still am to this day. I mean, bless their hearts, they were friends with me even though I was a hot mess. Um, they were the stable ones in my life, but I have to say honestly, God was a really only stable, always there for me. Because I really felt completely alone, and didn't didn't feel like I couldn't trust myself, so that meant I couldn't trust anybody else. Not fully. I would
Mm.
go into things, I would go into these relationships thinking, "Oh, I can trust you," without even knowing the person, without them showing me their character. I would just go into it, "Oh, I just trust you." And then they wouldn't be that person and I would get hurt. And then I would, go on the whole cycle of beating myself up because everything's always my fault.
Um, yeah, and I just read the need to control,
Yeah.
because that is one that it can be a big illusion in some ways. And I know
It
that you
is
have
a big
mentioned,
illusion.
you have talked about this specific thing about that kind of need, or to some extent even like desperation for wanting to have control in past episodes. So can you talk on this in kind of in relation to survival mode, and what did it look like, and what were some of the ways how you were trying to gain that sense of control, and probably also what happened once you learned that you can't
Yeah.
really
Oh,
control
I was mad.
a lot of things,
Yeah.
especially outside
So,
of you.
you know, I guess the pivotal point for me was when my first husband and I had split up, and we were separated, and I so desperately wanted us to get back together, of course, and have my family back together, and he wasn't doing what I wanted. He wasn't doing what I wanted. And I can honestly, I just was so frustrated all the time, which you can imagine if you're trying to control something that's outside of your control, it's very frustrating. And I literally remember the day that I realized that I have no control over anybody. I only can control myself. And I was sitting on my couch and I was upset at my ex and was trying to sit there and figure out, how can I get this to work? And it was like God told me, look, you can't control him. You can't control anything. You cannot control that. And I was livid. I was so angry. I remember standing up in my living room and screaming. I was so angry. And it took me a minute and I cried. I guess I had a little tantrum. And then I realized it was actually a huge relief. It was actually a huge relief
Mm.
realizing that I don't have to try to spend the energy trying to control something that I have no control over anymore. And at that point, I realized the only thing I can really control is me. And there's a lot of work here that needs to be done. And so it was freeing.
what was um what was your how you describe your level of awareness back then?
Oh, it was new. It was new to me. It was fairly new to me. And so I think that was kind of probably the really one of the first big things in my life of self-awareness was that right there. I was becoming aware of myself. My levels, it was nothing like it is today, because I even had awareness all the way back to 19 that I was abused, that I possibly shouldn't even have a family because I know abuse carries on. So there was a level of awareness, but I think that was the point in time where my awareness really started to open up in my life, and that was kind of the Kickstarter.
Yeah, because I was even like thinking it's interesting, where or when do we become more aware to a level where we see certain things that we might not want to see, or for years we have been trying to hide away from or not to look at, even though we
Yeah.
probably had a feeling that they might be there. Because that in itself, I feel like it takes a lot of, in some ways, even like bravery to be able to look at things, or I usually say about it as,
Oh, I should have seen that isn't going to move you forward. You didn't see it. And everybody does
yeah,
that. Okay. We all do that. And it's okay. You're now aware. Yeah, I all
Yeah, I
the
still do
time.
that.
I mean, and here I am. I mean, how many years into my growth, and I'm like, how could I not see that? But you didn't, and it's okay, but you see it now, and you have the ability now to make the changes.
So, speaking on changes, what are some of the things that, well, it might be even like helped you to become aware? Because that's, I think, usually where it can start, that you were in survival mode. And what was something that maybe helped you to at least start on that journey to move
Well, what's
away from it?
interesting is when I look back on it, I don't remember consciously making the steps. Like, I don't remember going, okay, I realize I'm in survival mode. What can I do to get out of it? Right. Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Um, it
Yeah,
doesn't happen that
sadly, it doesn't
way.
happen
And
that
I wish
way.
somebody had, told me all these symptoms and I would have had the awareness a long time ago. But what I did, and it was interesting because on one of my podcasts, they'll be coming out. It'll be out by the time this comes out, I think. Maybe not, is with Logan Cohen. And I asked him, what does it take to get yourself out of survival mode? And he said, it's creating a new life. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, it literally took my breath away when he said that, because when I look back on it, that's exactly what I did. But it wasn't a conscious effort of, okay, I'm in survival mode to get out. This is what I'm going to do. It's just, for me, I got tired of the lifestyle that I had. And there had been a major change in my life, which was a divorce. And so I was on my own and I needed to look at myself and I needed to make these changes. And so I began to create the life that I wanted. I started looking at stuff of what I wanted in life and what I did. And that was all also part of the discovery of learning about myself.
So, like with this, there might be somebody listening who is like, I can't really build the life I want. I'm barely kind of surviving the life that I have, or even like feel like it's impossible
Right.
for me. Easy for you to say, so and you probably have been in that place yourself. So what did you say to that person?
What you were saying earlier is true. It is, to get yourself out of survival mode is definitely a journey. It's not an overnight success usually. I mean, I don't know anybody who's done it overnight. So that means that you have to take steps, right? And they're baby steps, because to look at the whole picture and to look at where you're at now and to look at what I'm describing my life is now seems like it's impossible, like you were saying. But I'm nobody special. So it's not going to happen for me and not for you. But the goal is to take the baby steps. And it could simply take the first one. Even just sitting and it's going to be really uncomfortable and it's going to feel really fake, but do it anyway. And that is sit down and imagine the life that you do want and go crazy. Go crazy. Go as big as you want, in your head. Start there. And then start making little choices in your life. Because if you're at this point now where you're looking at this, you're realizing you're in survival mode, right? You're realizing you're in survival mode and you're realizing, I want to get out of this. So what's the first step? And so that to me is really first imagining the life that you want. And I did that a lot. And honestly, I'll be honest with you. I imagine it and then I go, there's no way. That's not real. There's no way it's not real.
Yeah. If you have that thought, it means that you're
correct,
starting to
exactly,
think in the right direction.
Exactly. And I just thought, no way. And take that first step. And for me, it was, I'm trying to think of what the first step was. Well, the control thing was really, honestly, that for me, that was the first step. And that was really empowering for me because it took a lot off my plate. It took a lot off my plate because I wasn't busy trying to control everybody else. Now I had all this brain space to start looking at me.
Even like looking at that list, there's definitely, I assume there was much less exhaustion, hyper awareness, potentially lack, need to control, that's already gone. Fear, worry,
huge. That one's way down with me, way down. I used to worry all the time.
Or like overthinking or obsessing.
That one's horrible.
Being irritable. So like even by just understanding or well, accepting that you literally have the only thing you can control is yourself, and even that
Yeah.
is like
Yeah,
full-time job. um
it is.
with like a lot of work, like working extra. um but even understanding that can help with a lot of other things where it can feel kind of not really empowering initially, because it's that the only way that when you're in survival mode, that might be the only way how you might be getting that sense
Mhm.
of safety, or like, because that control, it's giving you that ability to at least
Right.
try to predict things so that you actually are in control, so you're feeling safe. That's how you have learned to create that sense of safety. But then letting that go, that's something where that is, especially I can imagine that exhaustion and overwhelm, having to
Mhm.
think about everything at the same time, that
Oh
is going
yeah.
like way
Yeah,
down.
literally that I think about that now. I mean, I literally was tired all the time. All the time. I would even get a full night's sleep and I would be exhausted, because that's exactly, you're on alert all the time, and that safety thing is a huge thing. It was a huge thing for me because I didn't have a safe place for me, really. My bedroom, but if my brother decided he wanted to come in and be mean, he could. There was nothing I could do to stop it.
So with you, that realization came at, in some ways, kind of painful point, or like you were kind of, even like life forced you to realize that. But to avoid somebody having to get to that point when they literally are hit with that hard realization, even though it can be empowering, but
Mhm.
initially it is a hard realization. What are some things that can help to even like get to that point, or be better with accepting that there's things that you can't control, and there's, at least outside of you, you can work, literally it's a lifetime work probably to even like get to control yourself, and not even control, more like regulate. But like with that, to avoid somebody having to get to a point where you're literally like life is forcing you to realize this. Listen, buddy, like you can't control things. There's a lot of things that are outside of your control, and the best thing you can do is learn to manage dealing with whatever is happening outside of you. So like, what are some things that you would say that can be helpful to
So the first thing that comes
do
to
or look
mind
at?
actually is it's going to sound funny, but not to have shame, because what you need to realize is the survival mode that you're in is not your fault. It is a direct result of what happened to you as a child, and nobody taught you anything different. In my case, nobody taught me how to self-regulate. Nobody taught me how to manage these feelings. So
Mm,
there's a lot of shame when you realize that when you're carrying all this, there's a lot of shame, and it's a chance to beat yourself up. And that is exactly what you shouldn't be doing. Because again, survival mode was not your fault. And so giving yourself a lot of empathy and understanding opens a door for curiosity and healing. Because if you sit here and you judge yourself, which is what we tend to do, oh my gosh, how could I be an overthinker? How could I sit and worry? You start beating yourself up, and then you get yourself right back in that survival mode. So to get out of survival mode, to begin with, you really need to give yourself a lot of grace and understand this is not your fault, and there is a way out. And you're going to stumble along the way, and it's okay. Does that make sense?
yeah, and even like, it's kind of like shameless plug, but even listening to podcasts like these can be helpful, because then you can hear stories from people who have gone on the, or who are on the other end, but you can hear what they did or what was helping them, or even like where they were, that you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's kind of me, that's also me, that's also me. So it's even, because it's something where I feel that a lot of times we are so, or even like when you're in that survival mode, we tend to be more
Mm-hmm.
around people who are the same. They also are, or not even tend to be more about, we even like attract more of those people. And that's where it can feel even more powerless, because that's, you literally start to see that the whole world is like this. So I guess that's the way it is. So that curiosity, and even like wanting to look for answers and look for new ways, or just trying out different ways to get out, or at least get one step
Yeah.
further away from it, and then one step further away. That can be helpful. And I know that for me, even like hearing different kind of people's stories, that's something where I definitely have felt less alone, especially when you're kind of walking on this planet Earth, and you're like, I literally feel like I'm the only one
Yeah.
that is feeling this way, or like dealing with this. And then I turn on an episode and I'm like, whoa, I'm definitely not the only. And then you hear another one, you're like, wow, there's another person, not just that one. And you start to see that we're a lot of times much more, you have much more things in common than not. It's just that we don't tend to share the struggles or the challenges that we're going through, because again, like we want to put the front, like everything is good, everything is fine. So you're like seeking help or support, that could be helpful, but with that, I feel like you have to be careful
Oh yeah.
who you reach out to, because sometimes that can even do a bit more damage than help. Which again, that might just be another stumble along the way. It's not that you will be 100% right with every person, or the first time you try to open up to somebody or share something with somebody, but it is something that can be helpful, because talking to somebody who can give you some safe space can, one, which is I feel like it is important. I literally did something similar today with a friend of mine. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
just need to let it out. That's it. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
fixing it. It's not about actually acting on whatever comes out,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just
It
letting it
gets
out.
disempowered when it gets out of your head. So the stuff that's in your head that's you're ruminating on or overthinking or worrying about,
And I feel like it's
it
helping
totally
with
does.
awareness.
Because it's interesting, and I've experienced this myself a lot, and I've witnessed other people experience this, that when you finally say that thing that's in your head, all of a sudden it's like it sounded much worse in your head than when you actually said it. And it's
Yeah. And sometimes when you say it, it even sounds
yeah.
ridiculous. Like, what? Was it?
Yeah, why was
Was I
I
thinking
thinking
that?
that?
Like, what? It doesn't make
And the other
sense.
thing that
Yeah.
on the flip side of this, there's people who are on the receiving end of somebody who is in survival mode. And so hopefully what this podcast will also help is
Mm.
those people that aren't in survival mode can maybe recognize some of this, and it will give them more empathy and maybe help give them an opportunity to help the person who's in survival mode. Because the problem when you're in survival mode and when you hit the ceiling, there's no rationale. I mean, I can sit here and describe to you
Mm.
in great detail of what goes on in my head, because I can go right back to that place and remember exactly how that felt. And it is hopeless, helpless. It's that's where the fear really rises. And that is where you fully realize I have no control. Not, and you don't even feel like you have control over yourself. It's just everybody, this thing is running its own show, and you're there and you have to go along with it, and you have no say in the whole thing. So the person on the other end who is maybe witnessing somebody who's in survival mode and who's hitting the ceiling, one of the worst things you could say, of course, is to calm down, but just be there for them. Let them, everything will
Or
be
like
okay, because
everything
that's
will
not
be
at that
fine.
moment, nothing. And that actually, when that was said to me, that actually infuriates me, because that's not at the moment. That may be true down the road, but not right now, not when I'm
Not
freaking out.
helpful.
But really give them a space to talk. Ask them questions and just give them a space to talk. Or if they don't want to talk, it just be there to support them. You can't fix it for them. It's just a moment that they need to be able to walk through. um, but as they have the awareness and realize, I know for me that when I realized, oh, all those years and all that behavior that I had was survival mode. Now, it doesn't excuse my behavior at all. There's still consequences for behavior. But again, it goes back to, it wasn't 100% my fault. It wasn't because I was um, damaged. It wasn't because I was broken. It's because I was in survival mode.
Yeah, and it also
Oh
wasn't your
no.
authentic self that was behaving. And even like with this, anybody listening who might know somebody who you can identify they're going through something like this, uh, I would suggest not to jump into
No.
that fixer mode, because naturally we want to help, we want to support, which is completely understandable. And I have done this a lot myself, where you see all the things that they could do,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, you could do this and you could do that. And I know that from my experience, when I was in that place, when somebody would instantly jump into kind of with suggestions, I literally feel like they're trying to fix me. So it means that something is wrong with me. And then I start to go even like more down into that like negative spiral. So like with that, literally the best thing that you can do is just focus on trying to hear them out, understand them, and make sure that you do understand them. Ask them questions to make sure that you actually understand the situation, and you can ask if they're open to any suggestions or not, or they just want to literally like let it out. And you know, like, because especially if it's somebody close to us, we want to help them, we want to support them. But sometimes if we jump in with solutions too quick, it might not be helpful, and it might even affect their level of trust that they might have, because then they think that every time they come to you, you're coming back with all the fixes they can make or they have to make to get better, or you know. And that can make them feel even worse about themselves and their
Yeah.
situation, because now they're like, oh, it's you know. So because I feel like in that space, and you can comment on this as well, I feel like something that is really helpful is to be met where you're at and just understand that even though I'm in this messy situation or I'm feeling helpless or everything is kind of chaotic, I'm still accepted. I'm still understood.
Right.
I'm not judged. I'm not, because I feel like even when people go to fixer mode, that person can internalize it as you trying to now fix it. So something's wrong. Something
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
fixed.
You know, because I'll tell you, and you probably can relate to this. When you're in survival mode and you're in that place, what's going on in your head doesn't make sense. So someone's not going to be able to give you advice that's going to fix you at the moment. It's just there's a lot of chaos going on in your head.
And you also don't know how to
No.
manage the
And if
emotions,
you're
or,
not
you
aware
know,
that it's survival mode, again, it goes back to being scary because all this stuff is going on in your head and it's more than
yeah.
uncomfortable. It's frightening. And so
Yeah. And don't tell them like you're in
no, no, no,
survival
no, no,
mode.
no. The best thing you can really do is if you can is to try to get them to say what's in their head. They need to feel safe. They need to feel that they're in a place that you're not going to make fun of them. You're not going to abandon them. You're gonna you're gonna accept them where they're at.
Yeah. Not
Because the
abandon, I
reason
think,
why
is a
I
big
didn't
one.
say stuff, the reason why I kept stuff to myself is because I was shown as at an early age that you're going to abandon me. Like you're not as soon as I do something you don't like that I do that you don't like, you're going to leave me or you're going to criticize me or you're going to be mean to
Mm.
me or you're going to there was always a negative response to it. So I learned to just shut up and not say anything. So it took me a long time to get to a place to where, because what if I say this crazy stuff to you and you just walk away from me? You just confirmed, it's that stuff that goes on in your head, that fear. And I had it reinforced in me long enough as a child that I just carried it into my adult life. But giving the person a comfortable, safe place, let them say stuff. And they may say crazy shit, but let them. They need to get it out of them.
So with this,
Yes.
I have a question for you. Because moving from survival mode, we move kind of in the or we start to learn more about kind of the normal, what is normal versus survival, or that kind of
Yeah.
elevated state of like alertness. So the question is, when is the first time you saw the
That's a good
normal
question because I
that wasn't like that, kind of like something that was other than survival mode?
I didn't really see it until long after I was out of it, honestly. Cuz it's only recently. over the last couple of years where I recognized I was in survival mode. I didn't know what the name
Mm.
was. I didn't realize that that's what it was. So, and like I said, I didn't come to a place of realizing, oh, I'm in survival mode and I want to get myself out of survival mode. I just did the steps and it worked. I just didn't realize I was doing the right steps. But it's recently, it's over the last probably 6 or 7 years, I can look and see, maybe longer than that actually, where I'm not in survival mode. But I did have a situation come up about 5 years ago. I went right into survival mode. I mean, I went full on, and I recognized it at the time. And it was a situation that happened where our house flooded and I was in complete panic, and I went to the store to get stuff, and I recognized full on fear, panic, all the stuff that was going on my little list was going on in my head because of what happened. And the root of that was the fear of losing my home. Okay, that was one of my things.
Mm.
So this thing triggered me, threw me into survival mode of, oh my God, I got to fix this so that I don't lose my house. The threat was not there, but it was in my head, and it threw me right into that survival mode. And I remember, this is what's crazy. I was going through the store because I had to go and buy stuff, and I was just in this frantic mode. And I remember this lady was in front of me. I was pushing my cart and she was in front of me. She was quite a ways up from me. But I remember, this is how much energy I was putting off. She literally turned around and looked at me and went, whoa, let me get out of your way. That is how obvious it was. And as soon as she did that, because I was in survival mode, my first reaction was like, and then I went, oh, whoa, okay. And it snapped me right out of it. Because I can't put that energy out to other people. That's not good for me, and it is not good for anybody else. And that was a time that I realized, whoa, I didn't call it survival mode, but I realized that, oh, I went into this whole different state that is not what I'm used to.
What was that
When she turned
realization?
around and she saw how I was acting, and I wasn't even acting. It was the energy that I was putting off because I was just on a mission, right? Her reaction to me is what got my attention, and I felt really bad. I felt horrible because but that's what survival mode does to you, is it puts you in such a self-protective mode, and you're not even aware of how you're reacting to people or how you're coming off to people. It was an eye-opener for me, for sure. And I apologized to her because I felt bad. Of course, like I said, my first reaction was, oh, get out of my way. And then I realized, I'm like, oh
Yeah.
God, and I realized how my body felt and how I was feeling inside.
What was the emotion that you
Well, first of
felt?
all, it was almost terror. It was almost terror. It was so frightened. Again, I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my house. That was the root of it.
No, but like from her reaction, or something that her reaction made you aware of something about you.
That I was only thinking about myself, that I was on such a mission that I wasn't even aware of someone. I don't know. It was just a intense emotion.
Like, the reason I'm asking because I'm asking because there's something that I heard years ago where there's one scientist, I think, when he was talking about the most powerful emotion when it comes to change, and he said disgust. That a lot of times when we get to a place where you're literally like disgusted with yourself and the way you are, which there are moments that make you aware of it, or sometimes it's literally just you seeing in the mirror and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because
when you start to feel that disgust, it's literally you're in such a bad place that something about that emotion is helpful in starting to
you're right.
change
That's a
something.
good word. That's exactly
or wanting
right.
to change.
Because when I saw her reaction, first it was, like I said, anger, like, oh, whatever. And then it was disgust. It was, because it was like, oh my God, I'm creating this. I'm putting this out there, which means I'm doing damage to myself, but I'm affecting those around me. She didn't even know me. She wasn't even standing next to me. She was in front of me. That is what so you're right. Disgust is the right word. And then as soon as I realized that is what snapped me out of it, literally. I apologized to her, and then I calmed myself down and realized, okay, you need to take a deep breath and you need to calm down so that you can get through this, because there's a lot you need to do. And the last thing, and it just, I just remember how awful it felt physically.
And I feel like that's the power of that emotion.
It totally
literally
wakes
you up.
That's
It's not an emotion we want to feel, but the emotion is so strong that it's literally like waking you up.
It's a healthy way, because it only lasted to snap me out of it. It wasn't a feeling that I carried on. Like, I didn't beat myself up over the next, day or so over it. And it still affects me, right? Because I still think about it, but it was important. It was important. But it's not an emotion that I carried with me. It was an emotion that, it snapped me out of that. It's almost like this, like, locked in obsession focus, because I was just focused on one thing and I didn't obviously care about anything else around me. I wanted to get this one thing done. And that's what survival mode will do. It'll just get you so focused on that thing that you're not even paying attention to how it's affecting you and how it's affecting all those around you.
So, like, what are some of the steps that can be helpful to, you mentioned baby steps as one of the things to look at, but what is something that can help to start getting out of survival mode or addressing it?
So once you do your visual, because that's really important, because you got to know where you're going, right? You got to know where you want to go.
Oh, with this, I wanted also to add, because a lot of times when you're in survival mode, you don't really know what you want. Write down all the things that you don't like or that you hate, and then just write the opposite. That's how you can come up with what you want initially. That is another solution, because sometimes people, I don't know what I want. I know what I don't want. Most of us, we know what we don't want. Okay, write that down, and then next to it, write what's the opposite of this. Okay, that's what it is. So that's one of the ways that you can also come up with what you want, because it's easier to think of in that space.
Well, you already know, and like you said, that's your mindset, right? You're so focused on what you don't want, and that is a great way to start. Get that stuff out of your head and get it on paper. So write down the things that you don't want, and then write down the opposite, and then spend some time on that. So figure out, like, for me, what was one of them? One of them was as simple as, this sounds silly, but I really didn't even know that I liked color. Like, I like a lot of color. I was always wearing black. I was always focused on just, toning it down, because part of it was because I didn't want to stand out. But I like color. I like color in my home. I like color on me, things like history. So figure out the things by writing down, like you said, the things you don't like. Start writing down the opposite, and then start paying attention to things. And just and you'll know what you like and don't like. And it is that simple, because I had no idea what I knew what I didn't like, but I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I could do. Here's a great example, right? I used to think I can't grow plants worth beans, right? My dad's got the green thumb. I didn't get the green thumb. Well, I didn't put effort into it. So guess what? Plants, they're not going to live when you don't put effort into it. So over the last couple of years, I've actually gotten into plants. It sounds silly. You should see my plants. But it's something I didn't realize I enjoyed. And I didn't put effort into it. And I thought, well, I don't like it because I can't grow plants. But once I started putting effort into it and enjoying it, I can actually do it. So it can be something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything big. Start small, because it's really easy to go to the real big stuff. And that will overwhelm you and shut you down. Just start with something small, because once you realize that and you pass that little test, it gives you the confidence to take the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
I feel like this is also going back to the curiosity. Like, you want to be curious about yourself, and if there's something that you think that because you also can't get to know yourself, what you like, what you don't like, with sitting and thinking about it. You have to go and experience it. Even like with plants, you might think you want to do it, and if you do it and you
That's
see that
okay.
actually I don't like it,
That's okay.
that's fine. Now you know. You can go to the next thing. Yeah, and not be judgmental or anything like that. It's just that, okay, now I found one thing that I actually don't like, so that's good to know. Let's see what else I can do. And for me, it's literally like a lot of things that I'm doing outside of what I'm doing for work. I'm just, I don't have any plan or structure. It's just something came up and I'm like, this feels like a good challenge. Let's see if I can go and do it and see what comes from that. But I don't put any like expectations or anything. Well, I at least don't try to. I probably do, but then I'm like, okay, let's work on those expectations that I set there. But like it is something that you want to be curious, because there's things that you will find about yourself, and the only way you can find those out is by doing that. Similar to what you said, you didn't even think you liked them. You like, especially like something that's coming from or that they were possible, which for me was like running long distances. I'm about to do one, well, this weekend, so third
And you've
half
never
marathon.
done marathons before. And what
And
happened in this last marathon? You beat your previous time?
yeah, by
That's a
at
lot.
least 14 minutes. I would have to check the times, but that's at least that. And with that, it's even that I had this assumption that running long distance, even running itself, was kind of like it's impossible for me. I can't do it, especially long distances. I wouldn't even consider it. That's how convinced I was that it's not my thing. And now I can't say that I love it yet, at least. But I don't hate it, and I do find enjoyment in the process and finishing, and even like seeing that something that felt impossible, now it's becoming more like it's just like a thing that I'm doing, apparently. um I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest, not yet, at least. um but it's something that, and it's actually a good reminder for anybody listening as well, is you want to compare yourself with
Yeah.
who you were yesterday, not where somebody else is today. That's a really, really important thing, because that's something that and also perspective is important, because in my first half marathon I finished second to last, and naturally before I would want to beat myself up for it. Oh, you're not good enough, you can't even finish before like somebody else. There was like two of us at the end kind of dying. But what I did instead, I was literally laughing with that guy that I was at the end with, and we didn't know each other. We literally just started talking, and where we were like just at the end. And I was like, imagine the whole city is shut down for us. It's like we're royalties. Like,
I
you
love
literally
that.
change perspective. And yeah, because like when else you will experience
Right?
the whole city being shut
Yeah.
down just
Yeah.
waiting for you.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
It's literally like this. Yeah, it's and that's where like it's an instant shift from, oh my gosh, I'm the slowest, I'm not good enough, I'm the worst, and all this kind of stuff, to, listen, like, I'm a royalty here. City shut down just for me. And now like this week I'm actually doing the same distance that I did with my when I finished second to last. So that will be something that will be interesting to go kind of full circle and see how much better, or maybe not better. I don't know. I might get injured. I might not finish it. Whatever. I can't predict it. Um, which is another thing too that I can talk on, or at least mention, when it comes to that ability to predict things, or accept with, or being better at acceptance of not being able to predict them. Something that I was thinking a lot on is what helps to make decisions, because a lot of times people are afraid to make decisions because they're
Right.
afraid of
What if I
what
make
will
the
happen,
wrong
what can
decision?
potentially, especially new decisions or new, yeah, or like doing new things, or like, let's say, even like with this, talking about exploring yourself. What if I sign up to this class and I'm complete failure, everybody's laughing at me, or I'm just like, I'm the worst there, or like in my case with half marathon, I'm finishing the last, like, what will happen? So like with that, something that I have understood is that the more we work on ourselves and the more confidence we have in ourselves, the more we have confidence in our ability to
Right.
deal with whatever outcome. So if I do well, which I didn't even know what was well enough for me, just finishing before deadline was well enough, which I didn't. I finished like 3 hours and 4 minutes, which is super slow. Um,
Mhm.
but I finished. And so like I can focus on that, or kind of not focus on it, but it's something that even if I get in that situation, which I actually was thinking, I probably manifested it. I was like, what if I finish last? What if I finish last? And I'm like, here we go. Here, now you know what happens when you finish second to last. But it's something that now I know, actually, instead of like, oh my gosh, I finished last or whatever. Actually, now I know how it is. It's actually not that bad, you know? Um, and so that's kind of that fear of what if this happens? Okay, what if it happens? If it happens, the more confidence we have in ourselves, the more we know that I probably will find a way to deal with it. But for this, we need to go through enough experiences to actually test ourselves and our ability to deal with whatever outcome. It's not like you now sit and you think on and I know I got this, whatever outcome, I got this, I got this. It's not the way you build that belief. You have to go through enough situations where you're like, oh my gosh, how do I deal with this? Like, I am not, you're literally like I have gone in those situations where you're literally panicking. You're like, what do I do? You feel like it's the end of the world. And then if you go through enough, well, I don't recommend it, but it's kind of sometimes helpful rebuilding up. If you go through enough of those, you start to show yourself that
Mhm.
I can handle this, I can handle this, I can handle this. And if you have enough of those, I can handle this, and you go into the next situation, it's more likely than whatever outcome, you will still have that
Mhm.
belief that I can handle this because you have done it before. So like experiencing, that's a big part of it, not just sitting and thinking on it, but actually going out there, experiencing things, trying things out, as scary as it might seem initially. And I know how it feels because I have been doing it. It is a process, but then you start to slowly, emphasis on slowly, build that enjoyment in that process. And you do become curious on, okay, I thought I don't like this. Now I tried it out and actually it's not that bad. Like, what else could I try out? You know, and there's no judgment, no nothing. It's just that curiosity of, I wonder.
Yeah, it's interesting that you did the first marathon, and most people, like probably me, would have been, I'm not doing another one. Ugh, I was second to last, but you
Yeah.
didn't. Not only did you do another one, but you did way better than the first time.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one because I have something similar with 75 hard as well. Because a lot of people, when they do it the first time, I'm now doing it the third time. A lot of times people, when they do it the first time, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait until I'm done. And then when they're
Yeah.
done, they're like, okay, finally. For me, I think actually, like with this, it is that curiosity is a big one. Because then once I finish the first one, instead of focusing on that shame that might be
Yeah.
coming with, oh my gosh, I finished second to last, or I'm not good enough, I'm not a runner, which I know I'm not. Like, not with like my speed, I have always been slow. That's why I started to run and challenge that belief, because I was convinced I can't even finish it within that time bracket. And I just did a few weeks ago, and I have another one coming this week. So with that one, it'll be interesting to see if I can cut it off even more. And if not, I wonder what will
Mhm.
happen. How will I deal with that? Um, but it's something that I think big piece of it has always been curiosity, of being curious on, okay, I wonder if I can cut off like one more
Mhm.
minute to the next from the next race. What if I can do it? And even like with this one, I actually wrote them week before asking if I can do 10K instead, because I was that convinced that I can't finish it. Like I was convinced I can't. And then I did one pretty hard hike, which took me almost 6 hours, and that was half marathon distance. And I was like, okay, if I could finish this, I probably can survive 3 hour run. Um, and that's when I wrote them like, you know what, forget about it. I will give it a go. And also, it's something that I want to encourage people to do is, as scary, because like I deal with a lot of fear just going through this, because it is scary. Like, what if I don't finish it? What if people
Mhm.
judge me? What if whatever I think about myself actually becomes true, you know? um with that, I usually say, and I have experienced this a lot, is it's better to go try out and see and know than now think about it or sit in fear. Good example is this last run. I was actually about to get or ask for 10K, but I decided to do half marathon without knowing whether they're actually going to finish it. Because my fear was that they have the limits of how quickly you need to finish each kilometer. And if you don't, you're disqualified. Then I'm like, I would instantly go to my old belief system. I'm too slow. I can't do it. I can't do it in time. It's not possible for me. I'm not ready yet. And I haven't done enough long runs. Like all these kind of stuff in my mind. I'm like 10K, safe thing. But then when I got to that, I was like, okay, now it's actually my opportunity to deal with, in case if this happens, how will I deal with that? Because it's, even though it's scary to deal with situations when we are a bit certain about the outcome, you still deal with it. But then if you don't know what the outcome gonna be, you literally have to deal with it in that moment, and you don't know what's coming. But you also don't know how good you can do. In my case, I not only finished it, I finished it faster than the previous one without having, like, I was doing a lot of
Yeah, I
bike
was going to
rides, but
say you
not as
didn't
much
get to do the
running long
training you really
distances.
wanted to before you did the second marathon, and yet you did better.
Yeah. And with that one, I started to think, okay, if I finish this one faster than last one, what happens when I actually train?
What a concept.
Properly
What a concept.
finish the whole thing. And but if I didn't do it, I would literally sit in that fear and assumptions about me and what I can and can't do, and I would think that it's true. Okay, I can't finish it, so I won't even sign up. And I was literally this close to stay in that place. So even like years when you have done
Yeah.
the work, it still happens to you. That's why in my eyes it's important to keep
Yeah.
challenging yourself so that you keep building that muscle. So even like what if muscle? What if I can actually finish it? What if I don't? Well, then it's my chance to see how I will deal with that. And then go from there, and it will be a new door that I have opened in understanding myself. And those doors are endless.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean,
Endless.
and that feeling that you had after you finished the second one, the second race, and you did better than the first one. First of all, you finished it, and you did better than, you did better than the last one.
Yeah, and I was also running on like pretty much like one cough for 2/3 of the race. Even like with that, I was like, okay, 7K in, which is 1/3. I start to feel my cough being like, it was like sharp pain where I could
Ooh.
literally, I had to walk and then run a bit. And I wasn't even sure whether I will be able to run. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be cut off. And then I slowly started to walk, and I couldn't run uphill. It was like pretty hilly up and down. I wasn't, for the rest of the race, I wasn't able to run uphill at all. I was just walking uphill. So even like with that, it cut me off some valuable minutes, you know? But and 7K in, I was like, I actually don't know if I can finish this, because it wasn't like, it was pretty bad. Like for the rest of the day after the race, I was, even next day, it was still kind of hurting. But like after the race, for the rest of the day, I literally couldn't move it at all. Any kind of place where I would move it, or any kind of angle, any kind of slightest movement, I could feel the whole place. I literally thought, I really hope I don't have serious injury. And while I was there, I was like, okay, you literally can quit at any moment. You have that option. Or you can get disqualified. It's also an option, because I don't know how quickly the deadline will catch me, especially knowing how slow I am. So like with that, it was just like all that uncertainty and all that doubt, it can come up, and it's the fear, and it's like, what if I don't finish it? What will happen? And like it's, sometimes it's even like, I feel like it's even important to get to those moments, because then you can also experience or practice dealing with them, because it is something we can't really avoid. There will be situations where the rug is pulled under you.
Yeah.
You just can't control it. It just, life happens. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important to look for ways to try to understand yourself and explore yourself. And even like in situations like I had with that race, I also was able to show myself that I have a lot of assumptions about
Mm-hmm.
me that are not true because I was able to finish it quicker on one leg while haven't run like that long distances since the last race. I have run only like it was 6 months between the races. First few months after the first one, I literally didn't run at all. I was done with running, and I was like, "Oh, I'm fine. I still have enough time. I still have enough time." And then when the time came when I actually signed up, I'm like, "Oh shoot, I don't have that much time left." And like all this stuff that you deal with, and that's another reminder actually is that even as you walk, and this is something I feel like we touch on every episode, is that there's no straight path, there's no perfection, there's no, and this can be encouraging because you don't need to be going through perfect path to get to the result. My training process is an example of that because I didn't have perfect training. I didn't show up for some workouts, or I was doing more cycling than I was doing running, and I had no idea whether I was gonna finish it or not, and I still finished it, and I finished it quicker. So that shows that there's no perfect path, and if you don't take the perfect way, it doesn't mean that you won't be
Right,
able to get
right. And
results
it's the same thing. I was
that you
just
want.
thinking about this because I just gave an example of me going right into survival mode, right? And it's happened since then too. And it's almost like it's an automatic for your body to go there, right? Even though I'm not daily, I am not
Yeah,
living in
yeah, yeah,
survival mode anymore, but a situation can happen and that is where my body automatically goes. The empowering thing about it is that I'm aware of that. And so it doesn't mean, I mean, it can
yeah,
empower me. When you get the rug pulled out from under you, it's kind of hard to go, don't go into survival mode, right? It's hard because you just had this situation happen
yeah,
to you that there's a lot of emotions and feelings that go with it. So you're going to react. But the powerful thing is within a few minutes, you can realize you're in survival mode, and there are tools that you can do to get yourself calmed down. And the biggest thing is, one, being aware of, okay, I am now in survival mode. Okay, got it. Two, take a deep breath because it's the breathing that gets your brain to slow down a little bit so that you can
yeah,
go, you can manage it. Because for me, it felt like the thoughts and the ideas and the feelings and the emotions all had their own journey, and I had no control over it. And I find that when I take a deep breath, the deep breath, first of all, brings me more into awareness, right? It brings me into that place of
yeah.
awareness, and then continue to do the deep breathing. And then I can start slowing the thoughts down, and I can start grabbing the thoughts, and I can start saying, okay, well, that one is not right. That one seems right. You can start sorting through the thoughts and separating them.
Yeah, it's like going, it, even like as I'm thinking about the process that I'm going through, I feel like a big part of it is just going within and
Right,
say, okay, what's
right, right,
happening now? Kind of like
right,
observing. And seeing, okay,
right.
what's happening, what am I feeling, okay, this person said this or something triggered me. It's like, what's happening, kind of like just going within
Mhm.
again with that curiosity. Because if I would be like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling this way,
And you're
then
being
I'm
judgmental.
reacting
You're
and
being
I'm
because
kind
what
of like,
you're showing a great example of right there. You were just showing judgment toward yourself, where before you were showing curiosity. What's going on with myself? Wait, wait. That's the thing. And for those of us that have had a lot of childhood abuse, we automatically go to that place of what did I do wrong? What it's my fault. What did I do? And and
yeah,
and
yeah,
that self-awareness is slowing down and going, wait, 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 wait. What's going on here? And questioning what's going on rather than what's going on with me. And and it's interesting because there's a situation in my life right now with a person who I care very much about. But she's in a place of not being consistent in her life, right? So she'll reach out to me, she'll want to get together, but then it's hard to get her to kind of settle into something, and then she's kind of ghosting. And my mind automatically goes to, it's my fault. I did something wrong. I did something wrong, right? Automatically. What did I do
oh,
wrong? And then I start doing the ruminating, right? What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And I start going through stuff. So I did go down that road. And then I realized, no, 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 wait. Let me look at the whole story. Let me look at it objectively. And I realized that
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take it personal anymore because I realized she's going through a lot right now and she just needs some space. I'm here for her if she needs me, but she's going through a lot right now. And I've reached out to her and I've made myself available. But for whatever reason, right now, she doesn't need my help or doesn't need me. That's okay. And all of a sudden, it just takes that personal sting away. Because I automatically go to that place of it's my fault. What did I do? Okay. Start analyzing.
Oh, what's a good reminder here? Anybody who knows also somebody who is in survival mode,
Oh my
don't
God.
make it about you.
No,
It's not
don't
about
take
you.
it personal.
It is, yeah. And even like with listening to them, or maybe if they're not able to make you feel understood, don't make it about you. As it doesn't mean that you're now uh, making them or like excusing them, but they might be going through something where they're literally, because they're in
Themselves.
survival mode, they
Right.
can't focus on
Right. That's
anything
why I
but
was saying
survival.
earlier that there's a flip side to this, that the person that is, not in survival mode, the person that's observing it and seeing the person in survival mode, yeah, when you see some of these behaviors or like this, I'm looking at it objectively, being curious rather than judgmental towards myself and automatically blaming myself. I know this person enough. I know her heart enough. I know she's a good person. She's not doing this to be mean. She's not doing this to be a bad person. She's not. She's just in a
Yeah.
place where she doesn't have stability in her life. And I know stuff that's going on. And she just needs some space right now. She knows I'm here for her. I've made that very clear for her, but I can't chase her. I can't push myself, which is what I used to do in survival mode.
Yeah.
I used to chase people down. You're going to like me, damn it. It was just I got to have someone that likes me. I got to find somebody in the world that it's just that desperate, no, I got to make your life better. I got to make your life better because it makes me feel better, and I'm not in that place. Chasing them isn't going to help. They need to be in that place of openness. And so,
Yeah, and also be careful not to be in a place that I was in where I was trying to help
oh,
myself through helping
yeah, because
others.
you'll get completely lost in that. You are completely right. And this person that I'm mentioning, that's exactly the kind of person she is. She's got such a good heart in her and she's so giving that she gives herself away. And I can't change that. You know what? I so badly want to, because I see what a wonderful person she is. And I hate that she's going through this, but I can't, there's nothing I can do about it except pray for her, obviously, and be there for her when she's ready. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, and also like being patient. That's something that can
Yeah.
be very challenging, especially if you're seeing somebody going through something that you know they need to go through that. And there's literally nothing
Right.
you can do really, um, other than be there for them and support them. And if they need something, you're there, or you can give them that safe space. But that's literally all you can do. Like it's kind of like you're not in waiting mode where you
Right.
now sit and wait, but
And I
it's
was
kind
in
of
that
where
place for a
you
little
are.
bit because that's a place that's the default. That's my default. Right. And I was in that place and I was just kind of hanging on and, and I thought, no, I need to let it go. I need to let it go for her. I need to let it go for me. Because it's not helping the situation.
Yeah, because it's
No,
not doing it neither of
it's
us.
not
Yeah.
doing either one of us any good. And so that's where I'm at. And it's really freeing when you realize that you can like let go. That's part of the control thing that you let go of. It's very freeing. It's like, ooh, okay, so the only energy I have to put out towards that is, pray for her and make myself available when the time comes. I don't have to sit here and spend my brain space trying to figure it out.
What about the guilt that is coming with it?
There isn't any. Oh yeah.
Who's somebody who's listening, they might feel guilt of, if I let it go, you have that sense of guilt where it might feel like you're not
You're not
either
being a good
contributing,
friend.
or you might feel guilty that you might, yeah, because somebody listening who might know somebody in survival mode, or somebody who's going through something hard where they need to kind of process it themselves or go at their own pace, you want to help so badly, but you're in a place where even like with that letting go, even that is like, but I don't want to, because I feel like if I
Right,
let go,
right,
I don't care about
right.
them, or you
And
have the
that's
guilt
part of
coming
people
with it.
pleasing, kind of, because when you're doing so much for others that you're not taking care of yourself, it's out of balance, and you've got to have balance. And when you realize if you're there for that person and you make it known that you're there for that person, you're there for them whenever they need it, it is in everybody's best interest to take a step back, because you're going to make the situation worse. And the guilt, I think the guilt for me was, I just want this person to feel good, because then it makes me feel good. And, and seriously, right?
Not about
And I
you.
did a lot of damage with that one for a lot of years, because, oh, you're uncomfortable, so it makes me uncomfortable, so I got to make you comfortable so that I'm comfortable. I wasn't doing it with the awareness, obviously, of, oh, I'm doing this really for the goodness of you. No, there was a deep underlying thing for me. And you know, it creates a lot of problems in relationships. People have to move forward when they're ready to move forward.
Yeah, and even like with this, I was the big helper because I wanted to help others to avoid doing the
Oh
work
yeah,
I
there's
needed to
that.
do
There's that.
myself.
Oh, for sure. I was definitely the person that went around and told everybody how they needed to live their life. And my life was a hot mess. And that's exactly why, if I, you know, I've got all these answers, I don't apply them in my life, but I have all these answers. And, you know, that was part of survival mode too. I'm going to focus on everybody else, so I don't have to focus on myself. I keep myself really busy so I don't have to look at myself. Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place to be for all the helpers out there. Me being one-on-one recovering people pleaser.
You have to find balance. You have to find balance. And when, you know, there's a time and a place when you're a caregiver where you're giving more than what you really can. And there's moments in life where we have to do that, but it should not be our default. It should not be like that for every relationship.
Yeah.
You know, you really do need to take care of yourself so that you are, it's your maximum so that you can help others. And sometimes people, even though you're looking at them and you know they need help, sometimes they need to figure this stuff out on their own. That's more often,
as hard as it is to
it's more often than not
accept
that's the case. Because if you think about it, when you think about it for
painful
yourself,
one.
the biggest changes in my life are when I had my own aha moments. That's when there was a lot of change. Sometimes the aha moments came out of someone else's mouth that they said, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really profound. But for the most part, it was me spending time with me and God, and me trying to figure it out, or I was reading something, or I was in therapy, or somebody did say something really wise. But it's those aha moments that click with me that I would go in a different direction.
I think for me, big one was getting some mentors that can answer some of my questions, but I had to have done enough work on myself to be able to receive it and deal with triggers that came with it. So like with that, I think big one is curiosity, but also you need to be open to receive whatever they're giving back to you as well.
It's not all fluffy.
It's not just like, because the real friends, the real mentors, the real supporters, they're not there in some ways to make you feel good. They're there to help you get better and move to, or like improve yourself. And that it doesn't come with all the nice, fluffy, warm feelings. It comes with a lot of unpleasant and not good feelings. Like I had one lady who was interested to work with me, and she said me like, I thought you're like, you're not making me like feel good. I thought you're more there to kind of just be my like kind of cheerleader and you know, like stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, there's a place for that, but also you have a lot of friends who can help you with that. Well, assuming that that's the case. But sometimes, I have become more like that because I have seen how much it works for me. We need to have people who are calling us out with care and with love, because they want to help us. It's not to shame us or to make us feel worse. It's just to help us to see things and address them, because a lot of times we don't want to, or want to avoid them, or we're afraid of facing them or admitting that we have them. So like it's for me, it's been really valuable to have people who are able to see things that I might not see yet, be patient with me not seeing them, but then also be able to point them out in in a way that it can sting because we don't want to hear these things. But and I'm not encouraging anybody to run around and kind of point things out to everybody, like that's not what I'm saying here. um there's a place for that, but it's something to keep in mind, that when it comes to growth, you will have to, whether you do it yourself or somebody supports you with that, you will have to face certain things about yourself that you need to look at. And a lot of us, me including, we don't want to look at those things. We rather not see them, but like they're there and we know they're there, and unless we look at them and address them, they're going to stay there. And it takes a lot of, and I usually say this, that for people who are able to do that, they literally are the best people you can have around yourself, because they care about you so much that they're willing to risk losing you as a friend, because they tell you things that they don't know how you're going to react. You might block them, ghost them, get angry at them, react in some kind of unpleasant way, call them names for what they are saying. They're literally risking the relationship by telling you things that you need to hear. That's how much they care.
It's so true. And the people that have done that in my life, there's been those shocking moments where they say something that you're like, oh. And yeah, there's all those emotions that go through you at that moment. But to this day, I am thankful for those moments, because those moments, it is those moments. Yep, I mean, it's uncomfortable. Same. And I brought them up, a lot of them up on my podcast, where I've gotten called out on stuff. But man, to this day, it's still powerful in my life, because I can see this switch. I can remember how I was thinking before that moment. Then there was that moment, and then the switch. And it just took me on a completely different course. And it hurt at the time, and it sucked. And yeah, like I said, all those emotions came up, but it took me in a different direction.
Yeah, I feel like this is something where, similar to what we were talking about, discussed.
Yeah.
That's where we can also experience it, where somebody calls you out. And for me, a lot of times it's been like, oh my gosh, they can see that? They can see that as well?
Where's a cave I can crawl into?
And they're calling me out. Yeah, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to look at a place to hide, or like, do I block them? Like, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I get rid of them? Like, it's so shameful and it's so disgusting, even like to know that they know, and not only they know, but they're now like making me aware that they know. So now I actually know that they know, and it's just like, oh my gosh, they actually can see this, and they've been, not only they let me know, but it's like, how long have they been like,
I know that they didn't say anything to me.
Oh my god. You're just sitting there being like, how do I get out of this? Yes. It feels terrible. But again, like, it's that moment when you're waking up, you're like, it's like you get snapped out of it. And you're like, it's something through that experience. It's unpleasant, but it's similar to experiencing what you said about that experience at the store. It's really similar. It's only in more kind of controlling setting, where that person can also be like supporting you as well along the way. But I have, for me, it's been like, those experiences are some of the biggest kind of stepping stones to growth, and to like, even like to healing. Because then when I start to see them, it's like, okay, not only I know that they know, but now I know that
I can't really get away with it anymore. Dang it, they got my number.
Yeah, like, how do I hide it?
But isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting though, that our first reaction is to blame the other person? Our first reaction is to push them away, not look at ourselves. Right? The very first thing is not to go. And I'm saying this because everybody, we all do this. This is really common, and it's okay. It's okay. It's not you're a bad character or something, but it's really common that the first place we go to is we want to push them away, or stop it, or get away from it, and live with it, not acknowledge it until we take that moment. And then we're like, okay, yeah, they got my number. Crap. Yeah, my husband's that way with me. I've got a few friends like that. You're one of them that call me out on my bullshit. I can't get away with nothing.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, how really valuable is that? It feels shitty, but it's so valuable.
It keeps you on track. It really does. I need it.
And it's also rare to find those people, because it takes a lot of courage to be able to
Yeah.
to address people and call them out, because it is scary to do, especially if you're somebody who is like people pleaser or wants to, like, you want to help them, you want to get them to get better, but you need to address something that you see. It's actually not that
No.
easy thing to do. Like
And
it
coming
is
from somebody who had a
it
belief
is
system
challenging.
that nobody liked her. So I had that belief system at a young age, and then all the other stuff. You could imagine how intense my people pleasing was. Because already I'm already at a disadvantage
And
because nobody likes me,
yeah.
right? So now I've got to go through my life convincing people that I'm not a terrible person, that you can like me. So the people pleasing was even worse. So you could just see this vicious self-sabotage survival mode. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
there were so many parts. And when we, and for me, it was told to me that nobody liked me, but for so many other people, it's by people's actions that tell them that they're not loved. They're abused as children, and
Yeah.
they're being shown that they're not loved. And I think that that's why that in that survival mode, that people pleasing just gets so intense. You're just so desperately looking for somebody just to like you. I mean, you want someone to love you, but heck, I'll be okay if I can find someone that likes me. I mean, that's a default for me too. And I
Yeah.
have to, I am constantly aware that that is still ruminating back here, and pops up here and there. And in that situation I was sharing earlier about my one friend, the first thing that popped in my mind is, again, what did I do wrong? Oh, she just doesn't like me. And it's just there. And then I go, okay, wait a minute. Let me ask myself some questions here. Wait, no, she reached out to me first. So there must be something there. And she wanted to get together with me. You know what I mean? So you start analyzing it, and then you start coming up with a different. That's why the questions are so important, because without questioning what we're thinking, we're just going to go down that nasty road. And if you start questioning it and try to be objective about it, that's the part that can be a little challenging. But like for me, I went, wait a minute. No, she reached out to me. She called me. She wanted to get together with me. It wasn't me reaching out to her. So that's something. So that started to flip the whole mindset. Does that make sense? And then I could
Yeah.
look at it more objectively, because that kind of cleared that crap away of, oh, she doesn't like me.
Yeah, like emotional
Yes.
fog that is kind of
Yeah.
over there. Yeah.
Right.
With all those assumptions. Wow, this is really.
I know.
Did we solve another one?
Crazy. I mean, you're really getting me to think, and I'm able to articulate kind of what was going on in my head, because I lived with that without even thinking for so long. It was just how I lived. And it was miserable.
Yeah, and there was no space not to
because
live it.
literally, even when I was sleeping, I was in survival mode. It was just where I was at. And,
Yeah.
And I've worked through a lot. This is another thing. I've had to work through a lot of forgiveness with myself for my behavior that I had in survival mode. And it's almost like going to AA. I feel like I got to contact everybody, like I used to think that. I used to think I got to contact everybody that I hurt, and I've got to apologize to them and explain myself. And I thought, no, I can't. And there is places, there are people that I've done that with, but it would be impossible for me to go out. But what I do now, instead of trying to go back and fix all that, which I can't, is going forward, try to do things different, so I don't have to keep doing the cleanup, because the cleanup's not fun, because the cleanup doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. And you do sometimes hurt people beyond being able to be friends with them again or have them in your life again. And that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. So I will ask you what you ask everybody else. What do you want to leave the listeners
I want to
with?
leave you with a lot of hope that coming from somebody who 100% lived in survival mode all the time, didn't feel like there was hope, even though I imagined a better life for myself, I didn't believe it. And I am now living a better life than I even imagined. And I'm not saying that at all to brag, because it was not handed to me. I had to work really hard to get where I'm at, and I have to maintain it as well, which means I have to maintain myself. But it can be done. And you know what? It's honestly, it looks and feels way bigger than it really is. And when you do take that first step, pay attention to the confidence that happens when you take that first step and you're successful. And even if you fail, it's okay. It's not failure. It just means, okay,
Yeah.
that didn't work. Let's try something else.
Yeah. One
Yeah,
step at a time,
literally.
one day at a time.
Yeah.
That's how you get out of it.
That's
Well, I
the
guess that's
episode
the episode.
this time on
On
survival mode.
survival mode.
We're just scratching the surface too.
Yeah.
So
As always.
any listeners, if you have any thoughts or questions about survival mode, or there's other topics, we'd love to hear from you. We have a lot of topics to talk about, but you know what? Maybe you've got something that you want to hear about that we haven't touched on yet. So please let us know. You can go to my website, which is healing and growing hand in hand podcast.com, and you can submit your questions there, or you can email me, which is Lisa at healing and growing hand in hand podcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Seriously.
Or if you're watching on YouTube, feel free
Yeah,
to comment
for
below
sure.
as well.
We want to hear from you. We know there's a lot of topics, like I said, that we want to talk about, but maybe there's one you thought of that we haven't.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
it.
Well, that's the episode. And I guess we will see you again when I'm back.
Yeah.
Well, you will see Lisa anyways, but we
You're
will
gonna go
meet
tear
when
it
I'm
up.
back.
You're gonna tear it up.